Good evening, brothers and sisters. Welcome to tonight's presentation, which is going to be about the King of the North. Now, this study is indeed a very deep, fascinating study. There's been a lot of discussion of this study over the years amongst us as Seventh-day Adventists, and it's ranged from different ideas. I mean, the S.D.A. Church as a whole usually identifies the current King of the North and the future King of the North as being the papacy. And then us present truth believers, many of us believe that the current King of the North and the future King of the North is the United States of America. But this is one of the subjects that's very, very complicated. It's far-reaching. I mean, we've got to go into the Elijah message deeply, and mostly the scriptures and Elijah message. There is some areas of the spirit of prophecy that deals with this, but when we take the normal position of studying the whole picture of all the rod, all the spirit of prophecy, all the scriptures, this is usually the best avenue to get the full picture. In other words, the whole puzzle comes together as we stand back and look at all the pieces together. And we've taken this subject into deep thought. We've put a couple reports, one on our blog, God's Love and Law, and the other one on Hear Ye the Rod. And this tonight is going to be based off the Hear Ye the Rod report. Excuse me. It's something, as I said before, that I'd like to go into and present a case where it's not going to be what our standard S.D.A. teaching is taught, the papacy. Neither will it be, at least right now, the United States of America. And I think you'll see once we go over the quotes. Now, this is how we like to do a study. We know that the Zechariah 4 lesson tells us very clearly that we're not to dip our own pipe or tube, whatever you want to call it, into the golden bowl. And this is something that is a big no-no. Scripture says that prophecy is not by private interpretation, and we must respect that. We must at all times remember that when we do a study, we take all the relevant inspired quotes and base our deductions from there. And we mentioned this many times, that there's the Elijah Message scriptural index that goes into the different rod quotes, the different spirit prophecy quotes and scriptures, that is very, very valuable to a person that has a study to present. Because unfortunately, and this happens even amongst us so-called present truth believers, we want to present a report or give a study or something, but we don't do that first and foremost. We don't put together all the relevant quotations, scriptures that we use as a foundation. We instead use one or two, and then we hypothesize and even make up some of our own ideas here. And so this is a real helpful process when we come to the understanding of a certain subject like the King of the North. So what I want to do now is start on this. It's a three-part presentation called A Study of the King of the North. And it's, like I mentioned before, it's based on our Hear Ye the Rod blog website. And we have two websites, like I mentioned, the God's Love and Law, which is built primarily for the S.D.A. and the regular church members at large. Of course, present truth members can benefit as well, but as opposed to Hear Ye the Rod website, where we have strictly Elijah message material, the rod mostly, and things that are a little bit more technical, deeper with regards to the rod, because Mother, the S.D.A. church as a whole probably wouldn't relate to this kind of thing on the material on Hear Ye the Rod generally than they would on God's Love and Law. So we just wanted to make that distinction. Okay, so we prayed and kneeled and asked the Lord to guide us tonight to present this study. Please follow along very carefully. Take notes if you'd like. What I want to do is present it so that you can see where we're coming from and get a good general picture of why this King of the North right now cannot be the papacy, neither can it be United States of America. So let us begin. Little did we know that this subject, the King of the North, would be such a deep and complex study when we posted a study on it previously. After hearing from another present truth believer, we were compelled to look at it further due to the factors that need to be addressed. We are thankful for the brother who made us think and prayerfully hit the books harder in order to get a more complete picture, as we Davidians generally know the prevailing opinion is that the King of the North is now and will be the United States of America. Our post will center on the following question: who is the King of the North now and in the future? Our subject is based on the following scripture. It's found in Daniel 11, verse 41 to 45. He shall enter into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hands, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly make away many. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Daniel 11, verse 41 to 45. As we showed in our previous post, we must pick up the S.D.A. index prior to doing a study or report in order to review all that is said about a subject or verse. Therefore, we have a complete and thorough picture. I can't emphasize this enough, brothers and sisters. This is so important. We need to get all the relevant scriptures together, and then it all kind of makes sense once we look at this and this and this and this, and then we try to see how it all comes together. That's the problem with some of these reports, is they just take one or two or just a few and forget about the many others that exist. And then we make a report based on those few with throwing away the many. So this is something we have to be very careful for. Okay, let's see. We enter into this study with the following counsel. Our duty is to prove God's word correct, rather than to hold tenaciously to our own preconceptions and misconceptions until God himself steps in and puts us to shame. That's found in Timely Greetings, Volume 1, number 11, page 6. There is much to look at in this subject and much to try to prove. Granted, all the light on it is not known but we can put together what has been written and what current events we see today in the world. Okay, we're going to quote from the Rod, Timely Greetings, Volume 2, number 42, page 27. And it reads, "The only portion of Daniel 11 yet to be fulfilled is this verse, the last chapter, and since these prophecies are made to be understood only when they are being fulfilled or after fulfillment, verse 45 is not as clear as we should like it." What I like about that quote is that this tells us that keep our eyes open, we can understand more as we watch the current events unfold. This is very, very key to understanding the King of the North. We see what's happening today, and then we can remember all the prior quotes that we know is in the Rod and in the Scriptures and Spirit Prophecy, and we have a more up-to-date view of the situation. All right, continuing. "Consequently, concerning the place of his tabernacles and his end, also as to whether another Christian power shall inherit the title King of the North before verse 45 is fulfilled, only time itself will positively portray the whole truth." Again, this is very powerful. We underline this in our report on Hear Ye the Rod. Only time itself will positively portray the whole truth. Again, that's found in Timely Greetings, Volume 2, number 42, page 27. So whatever conclusion we draw from our study, we are counseled that events will unfold, and until they do, we just don't know all the details. We will start out with the unrolling of the scroll, showing the older date references first, followed by the latter. We'll highlight the main points and comment upon each of them. So what we did is once we opened that Scriptural Rod Index book, we started at the very beginning, because we know as present truth believers that light unfolds as time goes on. And so that was very true of the Elijah prophet, Brother Hadaf. In the very beginning, his light was limited, but as time went on, more was revealed, and therefore more information was given. So in 1932, the first mention of the King of the North is found in Shepherd's Rod, Volume 2, page 151. The Spirit of Prophecy also states that the King of the North brought to view in Daniel 11:45 and the two-horned beast of Revelation 13 is the same power, and that it shall bear this mystical number 666. We quote, "This power is the last that treads down the true church of God, and as the true church is still trodden down and cast out by all Christendom, it follows that the last oppressive power has not come to his end, and Michael has not stood up. This last power that treads down the saints is brought to view in Revelation 13, 11 to 18. Revelation 13, verses 11 to 18. His number is 666, and that reference is found to a word to the little flock, page 8 and page 9. Again, that was the whole quote is listed under Shepherd's Rod, Volume 2, page 151. But I want to highlight something as I'm reading this. We notice that the Spirit of Prophecy shows that the 666 is not the papacy, because it says 666 is found in a Revelation 13, verse 11 to 18. Well, 11 to 18 only describes the two-horned beast, does not describe the leopard-like beast in verses 1 to 10. So this is very clear, And another powerful point to remember, that the 666 is connected only with the United States of America, the two-horned beast, according to the word to the little flock. Okay, we're going to continue. Inspiration first remark through the rod concerning the King of the North states that the last power to tread down God's church is the USA, and it shall also be the last King of the North. We notice that the 666 man / USA / King of the North is one and the same last power to tread down the saints. So, back in 1932, the rod shows that the last, and we want to remember last, power to tread down God's church is the United States. Therefore, the last King of the North will be the United States. This is all very clear in this 1932 Shepherd's Rod Volume 2, page 151 quote. Now, for 4 years, there was nothing that we found. If anybody, by the way, in this presentation finds any quotes that we missed, we'd love to have you write it in the comment section so that we can be aware of that quote. But we didn't find anything. The next one we found is 1936, and this one can be found. Let's see, Symbolic Code, Volume 2, Number 1, and page 8. And here it is. Question: does Brother Hodoff have any light on who the King of the North or the King of the South represent? Again, this question was posted in 1936. Answer: the answer to the above question is found in A Word to the Little Flock, one of the earliest S.D.A. publications, in which Sister White says, "I saw all that would not receive the mark of the beast and of his image in their foreheads or in their hands could not buy or sell. I saw that the number 666 of the image beast was made up." Page 19. Michael is to stand up at that time that the last power in chapter 11 comes to his end, and none to help him. This power is brought to view in Revelation 13, verse 11 to 18. His number is 666. So that's pretty clear there that in 1936, Brother Hodoff still had the understanding that the last power would be the United States and the last King of the North would be the United States. Okay, let's go on to this further quote. The above explains that the two-horned beast is the one to whom the number 666 belongs, and that this beast of Revelation 13, 11 to 18, and the King of the North of Daniel 11:45 are the same power. Therefore, the nation represented by this particular beast and the King of the North, or the man who is to be the head king of that nation in the time when this image beast, the two-horn, enforces the worship of his image, whose image is nothing less than the thing he made, are to make a likeness of a religio-political system of the beast before him. And that is the leopard-like of Revelation 13, verse 1 to 10. That is a likeness of the papal system in the period before the leopard-like beast received his deadly wound. As the fulfillment of this prophecy is yet future, we cannot now tell who will then be the head King of the North of this prophetic nation, modern Babylon, that is symbolized by the two-horned beast. Again, that's found in Symbolic Code, Volume 2, Number 1, page 8. This is very important. Here's my own words now. This is very important point to mark. The rod shows us that this 666 man / USA / King of the North is yet to come and fulfill prophecy. And when he does appear, it will be who is to be the king, head king of this nation in the time when this image beast, the two-horn, enforces the worship of his image. Is to be is certainly future tense, and the time of fulfillment happens when the enforcement of worship takes place, not before. So logically, the United States cannot represent the King of the North now, neither do we know the 666 man's identity now. There are other aspects as well, such as the USA not entering the glorious land which it remains yet to do. That's a good point here, so I want to reemphasize that according to inspiration here, it makes a mention that the last King of the North is yet to come, because he makes the worship, he enforces the worship. So obviously the United States, on that basis alone, is groundless. We cannot say that it is now enforcing the worship of the beast. Therefore, we cannot say it's the King of the North now. Now, this is just one area of evidence, but we'll go on further and you'll start to see more of it. Okay, and in 1937, we see the next point of reference, and that is found question number 157. I wonder if you have published anything on Daniel 11, especially from verse 40 and onward. I note that Sister White stated that the power of verse 45 is the same power that received the number 666, and that it shall come to its end instead of Turkey. Then where and what is the tabernacle that shall be planted in the Holy Mount? If you will explain this for me, I shall be grateful. So that was a question brought to Brother Hodoff in 1937. It's listed as question number 157. And these questions that we're going over right now were found in the symbolic code. Not the answer, but the symbolic code. Apparently there was quite a few questions in the symbolic code. At a later time, Brother Hodoff took some of the questions that were found in the symbolic code and put them under the booklets called the answer. So let's see what the answer is from Brother Hodoff. It says, we have published but little on Daniel 11, other than quoted from a word to the little flock, and we have no light as yet on the questions asked. That's found in Symbolic Code, Volume 3, number 34, page 12. And see, this is what I love about inspiration from Brother Hodoff, is that, and he even made that comment, I don't know where it's found in the rod, but only a fool or a silly man would attempt to have answers for everything. And he was his own practicer of what he taught. He said right here that he didn't yet have the light, so therefore he wasn't going to make a comment. And this is true of the prophets, that they speak when the Spirit comes upon them. The Spirit of truth, the Holy Spirit comes into them, and they speak, they write, they speak, whatever. But when they don't have that information, they know that they have not been giving that, and therefore they can't let it go to the public. So this is a perfect example. Okay, these are my words again. We see that up to 1937, there was little light revealed, save the above references describing the King of the North, and nothing in regards to planning his tabernacles. One important point we'd like to make at this time is that the rod clearly shows that the King of the North is a historical progression of Christianized kings and nations. The line of kings has to be followed in order to see the whole picture. Unfortunately, some present truth believers want to cross out the Great Britain King of the North prematurely and insert United States when that time has not yet come. So we're already advancing where we're going here. So maybe you caught that, but this is so true that the rod clearly shows that the King of the North is a transferable kingship, and it comes down all through the time, down through history, and it changes into different nations and so forth. And so it's very important for us to keep this in order. Okay, let's go on to a reference that we found in track 12, and that's page 86 and 87. Again, track 12, page 86 and 87. After the dividing of Alexander's dominion, Egypt and Palestine were, as previously seen, ruled first by the Ptolemies. I really can't say that word, sorry. Second by pagan Rome. Third by Daniel 11:22, and fourth again by the Christians, specifically by Great Britain, Daniel 11:41. These are the only historically and prophetically recorded supersessions involving the ancient lands of Egypt and Palestine. The surrendering of these countries by one prophetic king to the other unmistakably identifies the King of the North and the King of the South from the time of the dividing of Alexander's empire to the present time, and leaves no room for doubt or for argument. In modern times, the Mohamian rulers are in prophecy called the King of the South, while England's kings, along with the disrupted family of Christianized kings, whom prophecy says will not cleave one to another, Daniel 2, verse 43, are called King of the North. Again, these verses are found in this reference is found in track 12, page 86 and 87. So here we're just given more of what we discussed earlier, that there's a succession of kings. And I want to break away real quick and tell you, just to give you an example of the people that are posting on YouTube and blogs and so forth. I was watching a sister's YouTube post on the King of the North, and she does a lot of good things. She's into sighing and crying and everything, and what I see is a lot of good things. However, she has that problem of dipping her own pipe into the golden bowl and pulling out whatever she feels she wants to privately interpret. Anyway, she was saying that Satan fell from heaven, and what direction did he fall in? Well, he fell south, so that makes him King of the South. So, I mean, it's really something to see some of the private interpretations that we read in scriptures is forbidden. Okay, so now this is my words here. Has the glorious land been occupied by the United States, past or present? That's a question. So we have to ask ourselves, has the United States of America occupied the glorious land? Absolutely not. Nowhere in history, even to this very day, have we seen the United States occupy the Holy Land. In part 2, we'll go further into the unscrolling of the unrolling of the scroll. Okay, that would finish part 1. So now we're going to go over to the second part, and we'll start with that. Okay, in 1944, we see a question that was brought to Brother Hoddif. Now, the last inspired quote that we have was found in 1937. So a full 7 years later, Brother Houteff takes up the subject again. And again, this is found in 1944, question number 163. What does the holy mountain signify? And the answer is, in dealing with the various prophecies, the shepherd's rod consistently applies the term the holy mountain to Jerusalem, the church, whereas it applies the term the glorious holy mountain, Daniel 11:45, to Mount Sinai. What reason, excuse me, this is the question, this is not the answer, this is the question. Let me start over again. Question 163. In dealing with the various prophecies, the shepherd's rod consistently applies the term the holy mountain to Jerusalem, the church, whereas it applies the term the glorious holy mountain, Daniel 11:45, to Mount Sinai. What reason do you give for this sidestepping, as it were, from the rule? So apparently this guy, and you'll find this throughout the answer and the symbolic code questions, there was a fair amount of naysayers, and they were more than naysayers. They were trying to entrap Brother Houteff and say, I got you with this question, to show them and their friends or whoever that Brother Houteff, was a mere human being that was making up his own ideas, and we can catch him on this question. So this was an attitude of quite a few people, and it's just amazing. If you don't believe me, you can read the answer book, volume 1 to 5 yourself, and see the answers that utterly are just got to be from inspiration. Brother Houteff was not that smart, okay? And just like Sister White had a third grade education, and then we know that she was writing so brilliantly. I mean, the thoughts were just flowing, and the truth was just making so much powerful sense. And Brother Houteff had a 4th grade education. That's right. He only had a 4th grade education, and he used quite a few sophisticated words in his publications. And so the Spirit of Truth was really working on these prophets and prophetess, because they in themselves weren't that smart. But when the Spirit of Truth takes over, he can take a dumb man, he can take a dumb donkey and make that donkey speak, okay? So this is the situation with Brother Houteff and Sister White. They were not very highly educated people, but when the Spirit took over, they wrote with God's power, with God's intelligence, and it's a beautiful thing to behold. So anyway, on this question here, this guy apparently has a I gotcha moment, and let's read what the answer is. The phrase, the glorious holy mountain, cannot designate the church, for the context of the verse does not support the notion. On the contrary, it clearly shows that the king of the north is to go forth from the glorious land, Palestine, and plant his tabernacles in the glorious holy mountain, while other scriptures show that the Lord is to return to the glorious land and plant his tabernacles in Zion, the holy mountain. Zechariah 1, verse 16, Zechariah 2, verse 10 to 13, and Zechariah 8, verse 3. So, since both tabernacles cannot be the same place, and since the Lord is to be in Jerusalem, obviously, therefore, the glorious holy mountain where the king of the north is to plant his must be elsewhere. Answer, volume 5, page 91. So, Brother Houteff makes it pretty clear that the glorious holy mountain is different than the holy mountain. Okay, so these are my words here. We see that more light has come about planting his tabernacle. The location will not be Jerusalem. Again, we see that this king of the north must have been inside of the glorious land, Palestine, because he will go forth from there before he plants his tabernacle. Okay, in 1946, a couple years later, we find the next quote. And that can be found in track 12, page 87. In the modern times, the Bohemian rulers are in prophecy called King of the South, while England's kings, along with the disrupted family of Christianized kings, whom prophecy says will not cleave one to another, are called King of the North. It is self-evident that planning the tabernacles of his palace cannot mean planning his capital. The tabernacles, therefore, must denote a branch of his palace, and his choosing to plant them in the glorious holy mountain indicates that the place is intended to attach to his tabernacles the holiness of the Christian's God. Investing the tabernacles of his palace with such sanctity can mean that it is the house of the headquarters of the soon coming ecclesial world government, which we have already considered. One location, perhaps Mount Sinai, is between the seas, the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. His choosing it instead of Jerusalem implies that it is because Palestine, as well as Edom, Moab, and Ammon, shall escape out of his hand. The statement, "He shall come to his end, and none shall help him," shows that he has previously been helped by some other power, and that he will not continue long thereafter, and most likely means that his ecclesians will be overthrown by the horns of the scarlet-colored beast. Revelation 17, verse 16. It now being apparent that the tabernacles of his place are supposed to represent holiness, and that the woman riding the beast, Revelation 17:3, settles the world's social, economical, political, and religious problems. The truth is clear that the present Christian governments are to be reorganized and ruled by an ecclesial head, not by Hitler. That's found in track 12, page 89 to 90. So this is pretty meatful here. We can see that it appears, Brother Hadoff doesn't say for sure, but it says perhaps Mount Sinai is that place where it will be the headquarters for the religious world, one world system government in the near future. According to Scripture, this looks very much a possibility. We have many nuggets here of which we can make further analysis. Mount Sinai is presented for the first time as a likely area for the planning of his tabernacles, which represents his holiness. This prophetic reference certainly points to the time post-Ezekiel 9 church judgment. And it makes sense because we as present truth believers know that the Holy Land will be occupied by the saints, thus escape out of his hand. Remember, the final King of the North, the United States, again perfectly fits this end-time scenario. As we posted previously on our sister site, God's Love and Law, we can see that currently the Holy Land Israel is being ruled by Great Britain, not the United States, through the current Great Britain King of the North, through the current Great Britain King of the North power rulers, specifically the Rothschilds. Now, in our post King of the North on God's Love and Law, we go into that very fact. If you'll study the 1948, the Rothschild family was instrumental in calling the state of Israel into being, and they also had something to do with the Balfour Declaration, which was 1917, And this as well had a lot of profound beginning steps for Israel. So the Rothschilds have been involved with Israel all through the history. And even to this day, like I said, we go into a lot of heavy-duty stuff there in God's Love and Law on the other report of the King of the North in regards to the Rothschilds. And this is why we say that inspiration, so far what we read from the Rod, Brother Hoddle's writings, makes point that Great Britain, at least at that time, was the king of the North. Back when he wrote that in this time period, 30s and 40s. But if we study the history, the Rothschilds, through different Zionist movements and so forth, still have control of the government of Israel. Still have their fingers all over Israel. Not only that, they are the true power of gold and silver. And this again is another point that we want to emphasize, that the king of the north shall have power over the treasuries of gold and silver. It's not the papacy. We understand the papacy does have quite a lot of silver in their vaults and so forth, but they don't have the gold and the silver to the magnitude that the Rothschilds have. We heard one estimate that they're making some kind of 100 trillion a year. I mean, if you'll study it, they own most of the banks, Federal Reserve. They have involvement there. These guys have been around for a long time, since the early 1800s, late 1700s, the family dynasty. So this is why we have to connect the rulership of Great Britain and the Rothschilds as hand and glove. They go together because of the inner workings, and this is why inspiration deemed it already as what we wrote as the king of the north being the Great Britain kings, and even to this day. But we'll go into it a little farther. I wanted to lay that groundwork. Okay, in 1946, we have some more information, and that is found in One Timely Greetings, number 4, page 23 and 24. Since those who ask the questions agree with us, that we are now living in the time of the end, we need not say more concerning that phase of the subject, but we do need to have them tell us which power at this particular time, this is 1946, in the time of the end, has added the glorious land, Palestine, Egypt, and other countries to his empire. The answer that anyone can give is that Great Britain took these from Turkey and has virtually ruled them ever since. Plainly then, during the time of the end, Great Britain is the king of the north and Turkey is the king of the south. And that particular part is found in One Timely Greetings, number 4, page 22. The fact that only verse 44 so far has been fulfilled, that the king has yet to come to his end, is proof positive that World War II is yet to be finished, that there is to be no peace now and no mutual agreement between the nations, although war is supposed to have ceased since Hitler's disappearance. The statement, "He shall come to his end and none shall help him," implies that someone has been helping him, and the world knows that it has been the United States of America. We therefore find ourselves living between verses 44 and 45 of Daniel 11. That's found in One Timely Greetings, number 4, page 23 and 24. So this is very powerful once again. It says, I'll repeat, plainly then, during the time of the end, Great Britain is the king of the north, and Turkey is the king of the south. So we have some clear identifications here from the Rod. Okay, again, we find these references very enlightened. As of 1946, the king of the north was no doubt Great Britain. This nation was the true power behind it, and the Rothschilds behind Great Britain had entered and added the glorious land along with Egypt and other countries. Now we can see that the soon Great Britain / Rothschilds shall come to his end, and none shall help him. This is further confirmed because Great Britain's main helper has been the United States. Yet we know that prophecy declares that soon the United States shall dethrone Great Britain / Rothschild kingship and take over and be the last king of the North. So it's very important that we understand this chain here. This chain says that right now, 2017, we still see the Rothschilds controlling the Holy Land, the glorious land. But he is soon to come to his end, and none shall help him. In the United States, no one. The Rothschild dynasty, the Great Britain dynasty, all shall crumble in the dust. This is truly fascinating, because once the world war happens and the glorious land is returned to his saints, then Great Britain / Rothschilds world dominance will be toothless and indeed come to his end. And religion will then take over, and the masses' main focus and the money power will be taken away from the Great Britain Rothschild Empire, and an ecclesial power in the form of the United States 666 false prophet shall arise. The rod confirms an important understanding of this come to his end. All these things, this is found in tract 15, page 67, all these things definitely indicate the time in which every man shall cast away his idols and his idols of gold. The very thing that causes the fall of Assyria, the powers which rule Jerusalem at the time God delivers his people. That's found in tract 15, page 67. Plainly we see that silver and gold and its lost luster has caused the Assyrian rulership, which is the white Christianized nations led by the king of the north, who has the power of gold and silver, and that is Great Britain / Rothschilds. These thus two new kings emerge, and they are the great I Am and the satanic last king of the north. We know that the East Bloc, Russia, China, Iran, Assyria, will win this last war, yet they willingly cede their power to the final king of the north, USA / 66 / false prophet, per Revelation 17, then only to destroy her later as per Revelation 18. And you can also find more information on that from Shepherd's Rod, Volume 2, page 160 to 161. No more will the world concern itself with the wealth game. Instead, religion and the mark of the beast and one world currency becomes the focus of the converted and non-converted heathen nations. Miracles and the Lord's awesome power through his servants, the 144,000, shock and awe the world. Yet just as the magicians copied Moses' power, the counterfeits, led by the false prophet, will have competing miracles and vie for power with their false worship scheme. The great controversy indeed begins. So we see that once this power, the King of North power, comes to his end, as spoken of in Daniel 45, the game changes. It's no longer a money game. It's no longer a game where, everything worldly is a focus. Rather, it's religion. Religion is now the focus. And I believe the reason why this is because, keep in mind, when Ezekiel 9 happens and this gigantic war over Israel happens, two things are going to happen. One, the world will have never seen such unfortunate destruction placed upon a church. His people will have witnessed, the world's people will have witnessed the church purification, the Seventh-day Adventist church purification. And this is going to be big headlines because we know that in Ezekiel 9, we know very clearly that Ezekiel cried out, "Ah, Lord, are you going to destroy all the remnant of your people?" In other words, he saw a vast destroying. And he fell down and said, "Lord, what is happening?" And the world's going to be witness to this and have so much shock and wonderment about what took place. This is why I say the focus is going to be on religion, the higher power things of the world, of the universe. It's going to take primary focus on many people's minds and focus. And then, of course, we'll have the world war over Israel. Zechariah goes into it. Nahum goes into it. All these prophecies will be seen, and the Sunday-keeping ministers and leaders and all these YouTube people from Sunday churches and so forth, they've got all these prophecies saying, "Oh, watch out, Israel is in prophecy, and God's going to come in there and preserve the land, and all these people are going to become Christians in the last days in the land of Israel." They are so wrong. They are twisting the scriptures. They have no clue what they're talking about. And so when they see what really happens in the mass destruction taking place from this last world war that unfortunately is going to happen in God's land, Israel, they're going to be scratching their heads saying, "What happened?" Again, this is going to cause a super focus among the masses of the world, and the religious folks are going to be in bewilderment. And so this is all going to fit into the 666 power, the United States leaders, and the subsequent Sunday law, because religion, again, as mentioned, is going to be the focus, and everybody's going to come back to the world leaders, the governments, and those in charge, and say, "We need to get right with God. Something's happening here. All these things are happening. We need you to help us." And so the government powers are going to mix with the religious elements of the nations and form that one world religious order, that one religious system. But this is what Spirit Prophecy talks about, the great controversy, because at that same time, we're going to see tremendous workings of the Holy Spirit. Joel chapter 2, the servants of God are going to be lighted up. Their faces will be lighted with God's glory. And they're going to have miracles all over the world. And so the people are going to be torn. The only way you're going to save yourself is be grounded in the Word and know the Ten Commandments and what they stand for. That's going to be the main focus, particularly the day of worship, the Sabbath versus Sunday, mark of the beast versus God's commandments. Which one you're going to choose? And so this is all going to happen very, very soon. The war, as we posted before on some of our other things, the war is shaping up really fast. The blocks are formed over there in Israel right now, in the Middle East. You got the Eastern Bloc, China, Iran, and Russia, and Turkey, and then you got United States, Great Britain, Japan, NATO, all these other Assyrian. The Bible calls those the Assyrian white. Assyrian means white Christianized nations. And so we're going to now go to the last part, which is part 3. Unfortunately, my copier quit, so what I'm going to have to do now is switch over the computer to the the actual post and read from there. So we're going to go ahead and switch that over right now. Okay, this is the other site that we mentioned, Hear Ye the Rod, and this is part 3. The next quote that we find is 1947, and that reads as follows: "While the Ottoman Empire has been shrinking since 1669, the British Empire has been expanding, and it today rules Egypt and Palestine. Hence, today Turkey is the king of the south and Great Britain the king of the north. We all know that Great Britain has been helped by the United States more than once. But if we rightly understand this verse, the events of which are but a continuation of those found in verse 44, the king will surely come to his end, and none shall help him." This may transpire before World War II is entirely over, or yet it may not. We gather this from the fact that the event of verse 44 is in connection with the event of verse 45. Inspiration seems to allow no time between 44 and 45. We do not know the turns which the war will take, but we know that the prophecies of the Bible never fail. As to his planting his tabernacles in the glorious holy mountain, it is not too clear, for the planting the tabernacles of his palace before he comes to his end does not necessarily mean moving his throne there. It could be taken to mean having a branch of his palace there. If he is to plant his tabernacles there while Michael stands up, though then the only locality other than the Holy Land that we know of is Mount Sinai, between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. From the study of the 11th chapter of Daniel, we have learned several positive truths. 1. That the time of the end began in the 18th century. 2. That the king of the south is the Ottoman Empire. 3. That the king of the north at the present time is Great Britain in particular. 4. That World War II is the war in Daniel 11. Now that the prophecy of 11th chapter of Daniel continues through the 12th, we shall turn to verse 1. "At that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. At that time, that is, at the time the king of the north comes to his end, and none help him, shall Michael stand up. And at that same time there shall be trouble, such as never was even to that very time. Only God's people who have their names written in the book will be delivered, none other." That is found in 2TG number 7, page 5, and page 9 and 10. As we read this prophecy, we can only see that inspiration seems to be speaking of the Great Britain, king of the north, not the United States. Several clues show this, particularly the fact that USA is mentioned as helper, not king, and that as we understand, the time Michael, our king, stands up, it is while the time of trouble is occurring, which can only be the end of the Great Britain king. The United States king is last, and thus would not be at his end while this time is on, for he is setting up his tabernacle, likely Mount Sinai, for an image of his holiness, as we have learned. In other words, it seems to be specifically call out Great Britain's end of reign. 1948, we find another quote, "And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him." The only portion of Daniel 11 yet to be filled is this verse. The last of the chapter, and since these prophecies are made to be understood only when they are being fulfilled or after fulfillment, verse 45 is not as clear as we should like it. Consequently, concerning the place of his tabernacles and his inn, also to whether another Christian power shall inherit the title King of the North before verse 45 is fulfilled, only time itself will positively portray the whole truth. The thing that inspiration makes altogether clear is the fact that the next king's stand is his inn, while all look and listen, but none come to his help. And at that time Michael shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And at that time, that is the time the king of the north comes to his end, shall Michael stand up and deliver his people, the church, all who are written in the book. That's found in 2 Timely Greetings, Volume 2, number 42, page 2729. Let us address the question whether another Christian power shall inherit the title King of the North before verse 45 is fulfilled. Only time itself will positively portray the truth. So we want to go over this point. Brother Hadaf brings out this question, or this general wonderment, whether another Christian power shall inherit the title King of the North before verse 45 is fulfilled. Only time itself will positively portray the whole truth. So what Brother Hadaf knew at that time, when that was written, was that Great Britain was the King of the North. So now he's asking, time will tell if before the king comes to his end, as written in Daniel 11:45, another power steps in and fulfills that position as King of the North. Okay, so as we have the benefit, unlike Brother Hadaf, we have the benefit of looking back in time from the 1948 quote, to answer the question is positively no. There has not been another one that has stepped in to be King of the North since 1948, because no other power, say Great Britain / the Rothschilds, are still actively involved in that land and have people in that land, specifically the Zionist movements, which comes from the Rothschilds. If you'll study the history, the Rothschilds have gotten way deep into Israel. You just got to pick up your study on that. You'll definitely see how deep that is. Okay, as time has indeed moved on since the prophet wrote these words, our answer would have to be a clear no. The state of Israel and the Palestine land is still controlled by the same powers that be the Great Britain-based Rothschild Empire. Okay, so now we're going to go on to our summary. From all that we can gather, it appears that the message tells us that the current King of the North is Great Britain, and has been since the early 1900s. There has been no transfer of title of this king, because we have not seen one iota of new rulership of the glorious land. But as we have learned from earlier Rod statements, the U.S. will take over as King of the North and be the last one. However, this all appears to take place after the final war and subsequent Ezekiel 9 church judgment, as explained in part 2. But we know that there are many details yet to be made known, and as mentioned, this subject, quote, is not as clear as we should like to have it. So we as present truth believers should be aware that the current king has not yet come to his end. With the end time movement shaping up in the Middle East, we can see that this end could be quite imminent. To further establish the current Great Britain king is to come to his end shortly, we read Zechariah 14:2. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, the houses rifled, and the women ravished. And half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. In view of the fact that Jerusalem is to be protected by a wall of fire, Zechariah 2:5, while the house of Judah reigns there, it is definite that the battle here described must be fought before the house of Judah is established. In that battle, the nations will defeat the rulers of the promised land. Then it is that the house of Judah commences to be set up. Oh, wow. This is powerful, brothers. We see that right now, unfortunately, the United States is being controlled and has been controlled for a long, long time. We probably never really cut our ties, but Great Britain still pulling the strings, and I mean that by the word Rothschilds. And we see that once this gigantic war happens, just like the inspiration says here, that the battle herein described must be fought. That in that battle the nations will defeat the rulers of the promised land. What does that mean? Great Britain and her helper, the United States, which is part of Assyria, shall be defeated. And this at that time leads to a victorious Eastern Bloc. And we don't know, like I said, all the details, but soon after that, the Eastern Bloc will secede its power, secede its victory back to the United States. Isn't this a strange turn of events? Here, the United States is working with the Rothschilds, being a faithful puppet, and gets defeated, and the Rothschilds are destroyed because they are the rulers of the Promised Land, and yet the Russians and the Chinese and Japan and Iran, all that, under the will of the Lord, cede power back to the United States in the form of the one world religious government. So we're going to see some strange turns of events, but this is all forecast in Scripture. And so this is why we mentioned to you before we started this study that it's not an easy study to figure out. It's very, very complicated. But if you look at all the quotes that we have, it becomes more clear. I say more clear. It's not perfectly clear, that's for sure. But we get a better idea. Okay, let's see. It says, this clearly shows that the next war is to defeat the current rulers of the Promised Land, which is no doubt Great Britain Rothschilds. Then it is that the final events take place and no one comes to the king's help. Rather, another king, the United States, shall set up and establish his very short reign, while the great I Am sets up his house of Judah reign and the premillennial kingdom. Now, we'll just we'll just mention real quickly the premillennial kingdom is going to be the center of the loud cry, and we've talked about this many times before. So keep that in mind, that even though the King of the North, United States, may set up a obviously the Rothschilds probably will capitulate to that. They will set up a one world headquarters based at Mount Sinai, which is a leading possibility according to the Rod. And so we can see that Jerusalem and Mount Sinai are kind of close together. They're not that far. And two opposing central headquarters. So that's why we say this is going to be a really interesting time very soon approaching. And it's one that's going to be, Spirit Prophecy nails it, the great controversy, very controversial in every which way. We, at the end of this post, we had some questions and answers, and we'll briefly go over those real quick. What about the king of the north being Israel right now, as they are controlling the land currently? This cannot be, as the rod says that the kings in modern times must be Christianized kings. That's found in tract 12, page 87. Further, the true ruling power of Israel, Palestine, has remained under Great Britain Rothschild rule via financial land ownership vehicles. See our post in God's Love and Law. Again, that's something that we go into about how extensive the Rothschilds have their fingers all tied up in Israel versus land ownerships and so forth. I think, if I recall right on the report, their land ownership vehicles, you see, one thing about the Rothschilds is they're very advanced in secrecy. And you won't find, deeds all over the Israel saying owner, Jacob Rothschild. What you'll find is corporations backed by land trusts, backed by this and that, and it's a financial and landship ownership web. And so, you got to remember, these guys have been at this game a long time. We're talking as late 1700s, I believe. Meyer Rothschild, the great father of the beginning dynasty, I believe his name was, began all this. And so they've had generation after generation of working the financial webs and the ownership of vehicles and all these things. Okay, let's go on to question 2. How can the USA be the next last king of the north when after Ezekiel 9 the saints are to go to Palestine and be protected by the Lord? The USA could not enter nor rule the glorious land, which is what makes it possess the title King of the North, per tract 12, page 86-87. This is a thought-pondering question. Great Britain has fulfilled the requirements to be officially King of the North, and the United States has not as yet. Now, this is a question that was posed, and it's an excellent question. To be labeled King of the North, according to the rod, it shows that you have to have entered the land. You have to have taken possession of the land. And I'm talking about the glorious Holy Land, Israel. So how can the title in the future be given to the United States when the saints, after the gigantic war, are going to go back to the land of Israel and take over the land? Okay, and this is the answer that we found. It's based on one of the quotes. His choosing to plant them in the glorious holy mountain indicates the palace is intended to attach his tabernacles, the holiness of the Christian God. Investing the tabernacles of his palace with such sanctity can mean that it is to house the headquarters of the soon coming ecclesial world government, which we have already considered. But one location, perhaps Mount Sinai, is between the seas, the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. His choosing it instead of Jerusalem implies that it is because Palestine, as well as Edom, Moab, shall escape out of his hand. Okay, that was the quote that we used. And then we added, this would seem to indicate that the United States will have Palestine, as well as Edom and Moab and Ammon, escape out of his hand. So the idea that the United States may not rule nor enter the glorious land would seem to be a waiver of the aforementioned rule. It seems that the rod interacts with describing both Great Britain and USA kings, even from one reference to another. In other words, one paragraph appears to describe a situation that will involve the United States, then another Great Britain. Both are kings and are yet to complete prophetic events such as Great Britain coming to his great world financial political dominance end. and the United States setting up the tabernacle for the headquarters of the soon-coming ecclesial world government, and then finally coming to his end per Revelation 18. And this will be the very last end of all the successive kings of the north. So we have the general outline now. I hope that it's been somewhat clear. I know it's a very complicated subject, but we hope that we've shed a little more light on this subject. We just wanted to put that out because as present truth believers, we so often see and hear a report that the United States now is the king of the north, and they totally don't know the real situation with Israel and who runs Israel behind the scenes, and has been that way since the early 1900s, and that's Great Britain / Rothschilds. So there it is. That's the king of the north right now as far as we can tell, and inspiration is correct. It's going to someday very soon transfer to the United States, which will be the final king of the north, and that will be the very last scenes of this earth's history before the great second advent. So we'd like to close in prayer, and we hope you've been blessed. Thank you once again, Lord, for allowing us to do this very difficult, complicated study. We hope that they've been blessed, and thank you for your word. Thank you for your divine scriptures and all these different truths that we can add together and put everything in a more clear vision. We ask that you continue to guide all present truth believers into the truth, and let us have no divisions, but find unity everywhere we can. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.